A ship on the edge of a vast ocean, the crew preparing to set sail into the unknown. They have no map, no clear sense of direction, only a deep-seated belief that beyond the horizon lies a land worth seeking. This image, I propose, is the very essence of faith. A journey not dictated by what we can see, but by what we trust to be true, even when all visible evidence might suggest otherwise. Hebrews 11, like this voyage, invites us to embark on a journey. It is a journey through time, tracing the steps of those who dared to venture into the unknown, guided only by their faith in God. This faith is described as the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. In a world where seeing is often equated with believing, Hebrews 11 challenges us to reverse the order, to believe first, and to let that belief shape what we see. Let us pause for a moment to consider this definition of faith. The words substance and evidence are rich with meaning. Substance, in the original Greek, suggests something tangible, something that has real existence. It is the underlying reality that supports all else. In this sense, faith is not a vague hope or a wishful thought. It is something solid, something that gives shape and structure to our hopes. The word evidence suggests proof, a demonstration of reality. But here's the paradox. Faith is the evidence of things not seen. It is a conviction of the reality of the invisible. Imagine, if you will, a sculptor who begins with a block of marble. The final statue exists in his mind long before he begins to chisel away at the stone. Faith is like that statue. It is the reality that guides our actions, even when the final form is not yet visible. Having established what faith is, Hebrews 11 then takes us through the stories of those who lived by this faith. These are not just ancient stories. They are, if you like, case studies in what it means to live a life grounded in faith. We begin with Abel, who by faith offered a better sacrifice than his brother Cain. Abel's story is one of obedience, a willingness to offer God what was most precious, trusting that God deserved the best, even if it cost him his life. Then we meet Enoch, who walked with God and was taken up so that he did not experience death. Enoch's faith was one of consistent, daily trust. He walked with God, step by step, day by day, and his faith was so pleasing to God that he was spared from death. This reminds us that faith is not always about grand gestures. Sometimes it is about the quiet, steady walk of trust in our everyday lives. Noah's story is perhaps one of the most dramatic. He was warned by God about things not yet seen, a flood that would cover the earth. Imagine the scorn and ridicule Noah must have faced as he built an ark on dry land, year after year, with no sign of rain. Yet Noah's faith was not in what his eyes could see, but in what God had promised. He obeyed, even when it made no sense to those around him. His faith was vindicated when the rains came, and he and his family were saved. Abraham, the father of faith, is another towering figure in this chapter. By faith, he left his home, his country, and everything familiar to journey to a land he did not know. Abraham's faith was a faith that moved. It did not remain static. He lived as a stranger in a foreign land, trusting in the promise of God, even when he did not see its fulfillment in his lifetime. The promise of descendants as numerous as the stars must have seemed laughable to an old man with a barren wife. Yet Abraham believed, and it was credited to him as righteousness. Sarah, his wife, also shared in this faith. Despite her old age, she believed in the promise of a child. Her laughter at the impossibility turned into the laughter of joy when Isaac was born. Their story is a testament to the fact that faith often requires waiting, and that God's timing is perfect, even when it seems delayed. Moses, the great deliverer, is another figure who exemplifies faith. He chose to identify with the oppressed people of Israel rather than enjoy the fleeting pleasures of Egypt's royal court. His faith was a faith that sacrificed. He trusted in the unseen God rather than the visible power of Pharaoh. When he led the Israelites through the Red Sea, it was not just an act of leadership, it was an act of profound faith. He stretched out his hand, not knowing if the waters would part, but believing in the God who had called him. The chapter also includes those whose faith was tested in the face of danger. Rahab, a woman of ill repute in Jericho, believed in the God of Israel and hid the spies, trusting that her faith would lead to her salvation. Her inclusion in this chapter is a powerful reminder that faith is not reserved for the morally upright or the religious elite. It is available to all who believe, regardless of their past. There were others who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and shut the mouths of lions in the name of God, and suffered for it. Some were tortured, others stoned, some sawed in two. Their faith was not in their own safety, but in the truth of God's word. They knew that this world was not their home, and they were willing to endure suffering, knowing that they were citizens of a better heavenly country. And here we arrive at one of the most profound truths of Hebrews 11. Not all these heroes of faith received what was promised in their lifetime. Some died without seeing the fulfillment of the promises. To the world, this might seem like failure. But Hebrews 11 reveals that their faith was not in the fulfillment of promises in this life, but in the promise of something greater, a heavenly reward. Faith, therefore, is not merely about getting what we want from God. It is about trusting in God's ultimate plan, even when that plan extends beyond our lifetime. It is about seeing ourselves as part of a larger story, one that began before us and will continue after us. It is about living with the knowledge that this world is not our final destination, but that we are, as it were, pilgrims on a journey to a better country. Hebrews 11 calls us to a life of faith, a life that trusts in the unseen realities of God's promises. Like the sailors setting out into uncharted waters, we are called to venture forth, not with all the answers, but with a deep trust in the one who calls us. We are part of a great cloud of witnesses, those who have gone before us, and who now cheer us on as we run the race set before us. Faith is not passive. It is active, dynamic, and demanding. It requires us to trust, to obey, to sacrifice, and sometimes to wait. But in all this, we are not alone. We are surrounded by the testimonies of those who have lived by faith, and we are upheld by the same God who was faithful to them. So let us live by faith, knowing that our faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Let us trust in the unseen realities of God's promises, and let us journey on, knowing that we are headed for a better country, a heavenly one, where our faith will at last become sight.